Hello and welcome back to UbiPsych. I am excited today to bring forth one of the biggest topics I've wanted to talk about on this channel. Something I've spent a lot of time on and I have a lot of opinions on, but hasn't made it really into a video yet. And that is the psychology of conspiracy theories. I have spent a ridiculous, perhaps unhealthy, perhaps unreasonable amount of time watching conspiracy theory videos and reading material on conspiracy theories in the last 2+ years. As a psychologist, I've approached it from a really unique perspective in that I'm not trying to figure out if these theories are correct. I'm simply watching the people involved, wanting to understand why they believe what they believe. And from this, we can learn our own biases, more about our own bubbles that we live in, and understand when we will and will not fall for these things, when other people may be falling for them. And I'm really excited to talk about this. And luckily, recent history has handed us amazing fodder for this conversation. I have looked into all the conspiracy theories you've heard of, probably literally everyone a little bit, and some of them way too much. Whether it be things like the JFK assassination, which was super interesting recently because some declassified documents seem to indicate the conspiracy theorists may have been right. I always say may have been because I'm not one to jump all the way to believing or not believing easily. But it was an interesting turn of events. Another popular one is the flat earth theory. I have watched so many hours of that in the past couple of years. It's mind-boggling. I don't know where I've found the time, but I know that issue inside and out. I think I could argue both sides of it. I understand it pretty well. So those are interesting examples, but what I really want to talk about is some more recent political conspiracies. I'm not a political person. This isn't a political channel. So we're going to talk about this just in terms of, hey, here are some examples. And you might get a little triggered by your position on them. You'll probably believe in one and not the other if you're like most people. Please put that aside. Please just come here with an open mind. We're here to talk about how people think, including you and me. If you feel a little bit attacked, like, hey, maybe you're irrational, I mean to do that. And of course you are a little bit irrational, so am I. So are all of us at times. And we want to talk about how and how to be that way less often. So let me actually run through really quickly the theory I've come up with. As I've watched these videos, I just really think about two things. One is, what can I learn about these people? And two, can I create an overarching theory about why they believe what they believe? More so focused on the believers in conspiracy theories, but also somewhat on the non-believers, really to understand that whole process. I am not formally trained in this area of psychology, although I am a psychologist, meaning I have a PhD in psychology. So I wonder if what I've come up with matches with the book knowledge on this particular subject. It may not, I don't know. So I promise to you that I came up with this on my own, but I don't promise that it's entirely new. So what we have with conspiracy theories usually is a very basic setup, and this applies to many things in life, not just conspiracy theories, of course. But what we tend to have is some sort of claim, some sort of thing people think is happening, and then some amount of evidence. And that evidence is usually quite short of enough to absolutely prove the thing, or of course it wouldn't become subject of this much debate. But what we have is, again, a certain amount of evidence that is more than zero. Even those conspiracy theories you think have zero, I would argue have more than you believe. An interesting side note of my delving into these conspiracy theories is I found all of them to have something really interesting. If I thought they were total crap and I look into them, I at least reach that point where I go, oh, I get it. This is the interesting information. This is the information you find compelling. And often in moments while watching a video, I find it compelling too. Even the theories that you would generally pass off as crazy, and including those that ultimately I've said, yeah, I don't believe in them. But in moments I get caught up in them, and that's super fun. So what we have is this evidence that's not enough to prove it. And yet some people believe in it and some people don't. What I call the space between the evidence we have and the evidence that we would need to know that something is real or to prove something, I call that the evidence gap. You could also call it an information void. You could call it a fog, almost like fog of war, in that we don't know maybe what some of the information is that we would really like to know to make a good determination. But we as humans like to know what we believe and like to make decisions and not be stuck in indecision. Interestingly, I find myself providing the unique service that I am perfectly okay being indecisive. And if I have a strong bias, it is actually to not decide, perhaps even when the evidence is convincing, or to not completely discard a theory even when it's ridiculous. I am so open-minded that I find myself in that situation. But it helps me to talk to people when it seems like most people are the opposite, and that they tend to make a quick decision and stick with it. Okay, so here's the theory. Basically, combining all the conspiracy theories I've looked at, here's what I think happens. You have that information gap, that evidence gap. And then I think what happens to determine if you believe beyond that is based on essentially three things. The first is, how well does believing in that thing fit to your pre-existing beliefs? If it fits well to your pre-existing beliefs, your previous biases, your previous way of understanding the world, you will likely go ahead and jump that gap because it makes sense to you and it feels good to jump that gap. I would even go a step further to say, you may have heard the term cognitive dissonance, which is really, really popular right now. You could say it in that way, that when we have this cognitive dissonance of, is it true or is it untrue? I see the evidence, I want to believe it or I don't want to believe it. It creates this turmoil. And I would say that we resolve that often based on what our pre-existing beliefs are. The most likely thing is just to go with what we already believe, because it makes us feel smart, makes us feel right about what we believed in the past, and makes our whole world sensible to us. The second thing that happens is that if there is a real meaningful outcome from believing one way or the other, that seems to be almost as powerful as our pre-existing beliefs. So what is the consequence of the conspiracy being true or the conspiracy being false? And if we want a particular outcome there, or are afraid of or averse to one of the outcomes, that tends to drive the situation there. And then the third thing that seems to matter here is, it's a little more subtle, but it's just about the way we work, the way our brains work, and that is that we are built not to make decisions with complete evidence, but to work on minimal evidence. The term you'll hear for the most part is heuristics, which is H-E-U-R-I-S-T-I-C, or with an S, heuristics. And that is the way we make decisions without full information. We make fast decisions, we make gut decisions, we jump to conclusions when we shouldn't, as well as it allows us to act rather than be frozen by indecision. By making a decision when we know evidence is incomplete, but we're okay with that. Or more accurately, we have to make decisions without full evidence to survive. This is believed to stem from the things like assessing danger that we must do in a split second, determining who's trustful around us, determining if food is safe. Imagine in a natural world how all these things absolutely must be done without complete evidence. And so that's the way it works. So also understand, if you catch yourself jumping to a conclusion, believing in a conspiracy that isn't true, or even not believing when maybe there's enough evidence, you're just normal. There's no reason to beat yourself up about it. Heuristics tell us that what we will do is make that decision with incomplete evidence rather than find complete evidence. So if you haven't already picked it up from the title and description, you're now going to learn the specific topics I want to talk about today. But before I get to those, very briefly, I want to give one example because it's a fun example and such a popular example on YouTube, to again give that example of my theory with a little bit of an explanation. Examples are often better than just laying out a basic theory. So I mentioned the flat earth conspiracy. Some people in that community don't like it being called a conspiracy. Apologies to those people. Let me just call it that. It's a thing some people believe in and some people don't. And there's a little bit of evidence for it, maybe a lot of evidence for it, but not enough that we all agree. So it fits. It fits to this topic I'd like to talk about. There again was one that I have to say I gained respect for the movement some by looking at it. Ultimately, I'm not a flat earther, but I will do a whole video on this and it will probably be very long. And there are some things I have to say that will surprise people about just how understanding I am of the believers. However, using that example and the theory I've laid out, let's look at that. So what if the earth were flat? Well, what do pre-existing beliefs have to do with that? most people who are science-minded like myself would feel kind of stupid for having believed in outer space and space travel and this round Earth that we live in. And so, admittedly, we might be hesitant to accept that even if it were true. On the other hand, you have people, what I've noticed is that the people who are most likely to believe in it, and again, this is one theory that they're likely to believe in. I'm not pointing out this group as overall a bunch of fools who will fall for anything. But the flat Earth conspiracy in particular appeals to those who are Christian, or I believe there are some other faiths who line up with this, but basically where the view of the world they're given from their faith actually indicates that the Earth is flat, or that there is a firmament, some sort of barrier above the Earth between the heavens and the Earth. People even suggest that it's not space up there, but that it's water. So I go into it with the bias of course, I believe in science, I believe in space travel and all these things. And so I'm generally not going to believe in it. Whereas somebody with a strong Christian background would actually find that the flat Earth theory is more consistent with their pre-existing beliefs, and they're more likely to believe in it. Again, I do not intend that to be an insult to Christians. I really don't. This is one of the theories that Christians are more likely to believe in. There are other theories they're less likely to believe in, and they may be right by not believing in those. The people who are more science-minded may fall for other ones more easily. It's just not that example. To move through this a little more quickly, again, what's the actual outcome maybe if the Earth is flat? That would mean that the biblical account of the Earth is true, or at least somewhat. And so the actual result would be, hey, those people were right, people like me were wrong. And you might even see conversion to Christianity. So there's another reason, whereas I view conversion to Christianity as either neutral or negative, those Christians would say, yeah, that's good. So that's another thing that would bring them on board and keep me away. Again, both of us perhaps being irrational. I might not accept it even if there were evidence. They might believe it even without evidence. And finally, heuristics, I don't need to really explain that one again, other than to say it's natural, that I will reject it since I don't see anything convincing, and they will accept it, whoever those people are that believe in it, because they want to, because they're primed to, and they won't have the full evidence, but they'll believe quite completely, whereas I'll reject it quite completely. I tend to believe I actually am more thoughtful than to fall into this trap a lot, but of course it applies to me. All right, so topic of the day, the topic of the day that has excited me to make this video is that I can't believe what a perfect parallel splitting people down the middle we have been handed from recent history. So what that is, get ready to be angry, get ready to be opinionated. There are two things that I believe are essentially identical and perfect mirror images. We have two recent presidents, Obama and Trump. Both were highly, highly disliked by their opposition. I don't know if I can say both were really well liked by their party and their groups, but there are groups of people that really liked both selections. They also both came into office immediately under the pressure of a claim that their presidential election was illegitimate. With Obama, it was about his birth certificate. You may remember that. There was what I'm going to call a conspiracy theory, and I'm going to call the other one that as well, that his birth certificate was forged and fake, and that he was not an American citizen, meaning that he was not eligible to be US president. For Trump, since it's more current, you probably know more about it. I'll assume you know more about it. There is the Russia collusion conspiracy theory, which purports that he has colluded with Russia and that illegal things happened to win the election. Also, pretty serious if it were true. These both fit perfectly, and you can see your friends and family show their true colors by how they grasp to one and not the other, or how they've evaluated the evidence on either one. And I would argue they're about equal from beginning to end in their structure and in their legitimacy. I'm actually not that interested in that. You can have your own opinion on that. If you think one of those is complete garbage and the other true, stick with me. It doesn't really matter. It is still worth us talking. If you think they're both bad or both good, both true, both false, whatever you want to call that, then also stick with me. I'm not here to convince you of one. I actually don't have a strong opinion on either. I remain undecided on both. And I just want to show what is going on in our weird little minds. And I think you'll see it too. So this fits to my theory. How? Pre-existing beliefs. You think one party's good, one party's bad, right? Most people do. I actually am not very much into partisan politics. Maybe you guys aren't either. Great, then you might see this more as a spectator like myself. But you know how true it is that people tend to see one as inherently honest or dishonest and the other as the opposite. So, you know, honest Democrats, dishonest Republicans, or the reverse. Is there an outcome to be had here? Absolutely. The election would be overturned in both cases if Obama was not born in the United States or if Trump was elected illegally with Russia's help. Oh man, it's fitting to the theory nicely. And of course, the heuristics part, I'm going to leave alone again, just to say that's how we think and that it's natural for us to move forward without full evidence and pick a side. Now, if you're thinking that you like one and don't like the other, you're probably thinking about reasons for that. You're thinking about evidence, you're thinking about, but this, and that's not fair, that one's crap, this one's real. Well, let's dig into it just a little, because again, I'm not here to decide which one's true. They both happen to come down to the support, the evidence that we do have being expert opinion or expert statements. We don't really have the direct evidence that we'd need in either case. We don't have an admission of guilt or something that proves it beyond any reasonable doubt. They both sort of lie in the middle. I didn't even know. I don't know how many of you will know. I'm going to guess, I'm going to open your eyes, some of you, to this, the older conspiracy theory about Obama's birth certificate. I'm surrounded by a lot of people. I would say most are liberal or libertarian or anarchist and some conservatives. But I will just say that I thought ever since it was around that this theory about the birth certificate was a complete nonsense fabrication. Only about a year ago did I actually, for the first time ever, as part of delving into conspiracy theories, look at the evidence. And I was shocked that there was something fairly substantial there to be seen. So I'll fill you in briefly. Basically, a group of conservatives, don't get too triggered by that because, as we know, the people in FBI and other going after Trump are very anti-Trump. Of course, the people who are bringing the evidence against them are against them. The other people won't bother, and these people are motivated to do so. Doesn't mean they're liars. Doesn't mean also that they're to be trusted completely. I would say let's be skeptical. But of course, it's people who don't like them bringing the claims and the charges. That's not a good excuse for saying that it's untrue. But some very conservative people did head up the investigation, but they actually had independent organizations, let's just say independent for now, look at the birth certificate. There was an American and a European organization that looked at the birth certificate, and they both declared it essentially fake. And there was a presentation about an hour long that details the source document. They say, hey, look, this is the birth certificate that someone used. And then they photoshopped it to add his name. And experts who are truly legitimate in their field are saying this is what happened. They're saying they believe it is forged. It blew my mind. I thought this was just some backwoods Republican insanity. And maybe it is. Maybe it's just they convinced enough people to lie on their behalf. I don't know. But it blew my mind to see that. But ultimately what it comes down to is a bunch of experts saying this doesn't look right and we think it's real. The conspiracy, so to speak, is real. The same thing is happening today, right? We have legitimate authorities inside of the government, FBI, CIA, other people saying we're confident that Trump did something. They don't provide the direct evidence yet. They're talking about it. I guess they're talking about revealing whatever they've got. I'm a little skeptical. You've got a year or more they've been doing this and they don't really have it yet. I'm thinking they don't have much. To be clear, I'm not political in general. I'll just say that neither Trump nor Obama are a president I would ever choose. They're so far from my belief system that I don't like either of them, but I'm not particularly triggered by either just because I feel like they're both bad and all of our options were bad. So this fits to my theory. And I want you to start seeing this as maybe you're like one of my liberal friends who was like, oh, Trump Russia's real, but the birth certificate thing was fake. Based on what? We've got expert opinion in both. And what I see is you jumping to that conclusion. And probably the correct thing with both is let's pursue these a little further down the rabbit hole. Which brings me to my next point, and something I very much dislike in this process, I mean very much, is what happens with these issues is you find the people who don't believe in them also call for an end to the investigation or even talking about it. It's definitely true that with the Obama birth certificate, it was painted as racist or inappropriate or un-American or crazy to believe in that conspiracy theory. And if you tried to bring it up with people, they would not discuss it. They didn't want to hear the evidence. They just wanted it shut down. Similarly, now you have conservatives saying, let's just end the investigation. The best thing we should do is fire everybody involved and stop the investigation. I personally don't see that viewpoint as very relevant. Yes, when they come up with something, we need to be skeptical because of who they are. Absolutely, we need to be skeptical and not just accept it. But let's see what the actual evidence is. Can they fill the evidence gap with something convincing? And if they're very biased themselves, then let's involve other people and other means for validating it. But to shut it down doesn't make much sense at all. So to continue with this theory, I think that's basically what we have going on here is the perfect historical example to show where two nearly identical situations that are baffling that, gee, all of a sudden upon winning a presidential election, everyone thinks this person is corrupt and not even a citizen and some sort of conspirator with a foreign government, things that would have mattered long before their presidency if they were true, but they come up all of a sudden. And I think what it is this thing I've laid out, which is your existing beliefs, which is why so many people, even before they knew anything, like a single thing, they heard there was a Trump Russia conspiracy, like, oh, that's it, we got him. I knew he did this up to something. That guy's terrible. And same with Obama. Gosh, I knew something was up with him. I'm so glad we found a reason. And I think some people believed in it immediately with zero evidence. Other people later refused to look at the evidence and say we have some great evidence in either case come out that almost proves it. I think they're still going to just deny. And it's kind of interesting in that way. So I want to help you navigate that. Hopefully see this bias in yourself. If you've really bought into one and not the other, why? I'd love to continue the conversation in the comments. If you have any other conspiracy theories you'd like this applied to, like to say maybe it doesn't work for one of them or that you're wondering how it would apply, put that in the comments as well. But in this case, I want to help you to be one of the rational people in the middle, not an Alex Jones, not a Rachel Maddow, not Keith Olbermann, but someone with some balance in their thinking, who isn't just obsessed with a particular outcome. And by the way, I can already feel the complaints about who I picked. Just those are people who have stated some strong opinions. Get over it. They don't seem to be investigating. They seem to be really invested in one outcome. I'm not saying they're the same, or I don't know, but I guess I am willing to say Rachel Maddow is just as crazy as Alex Jones, but has only become as such since the election and since Donald Trump has driven her to madness. Whereas Alex is kind of like always on crazy mode. But you know what? Just to be clear, I actually will watch both of them regularly because I like to keep my mind open, and they've both had good things to say, things that I liked. So I'm not throwing them completely under the bus. I just think they're very invested in one outcome or the other. Another thing I encourage you to do is keep track of your own success rate. Do you take notice of when you've been wrong in the past? Did you buy into some of the other things, other theories, and realize that they were wrong? Did you maybe think that the Trump dossier about Pissgate was real? It looks like that one's not. Again, it's not decided, but if it turns out to be fake and you were believing in it and it was just a concoction, are you logging that? Are you allowing yourself to feel wrong and to realize that you jumped the gun on that one? Conversely, if it turns out to be true, were you holding yourself back from believing in it for some unfair reason? I want you to think in that way, and hopefully what we can get out of this is we can all be better at understanding our own brains and not fall for the natural weaknesses in our brains. Again, to clarify, it is pre-existing beliefs and heuristics sort of that are going to lead us very, very much towards this particular outcome. And then also the icing on the cake is if we get something out of it that we want, like overturning an election that has very much upset us. But in these examples I've given, I think they are exactly equal in their structure. Maybe one is legitimate and one isn't. That's okay. But the point is how you have approached it and thought about the evidence says a lot about your own biases and the bubble that you live in. Thanks for listening. Let me know if you have another topic you'd like or any comments below. I love the arguments. I don't mind how stupid you tell me I am or how many downvotes I get. I'm here for critical thinking, not for popularity. And I really appreciate you being here. Until next time, this is Superpsych, and I see psychology everywhere.